The Humanist Manifesto is a short document, about 1,100 words, starting, "The time has come for widespread recognition of the radical changes in religious beliefs throughout the modern world." It succinctly states 15 affirmations as a new statement of the means and purposes of religion, seeking to establish religion that can hope to be a synthesizing and dynamic force for today and shaped for the needs of the 20th century in which it was written. The religious humanist affirmations include that the universe is self-existing and not created, that man, in the language of the time, is part of nature and emerged in a continuous process, that science makes the supernatural unacceptable, that the objective of religion is human significance obtained through human expression, and that associations and institutions exist for the fulfillment of human life. Though intended to be a statement for a general audience, a document advocating a new way of approaching religion, the Humanist Manifesto is important to Unitarian Universalist history as a defining document of Unitarianism in the 20th century. At least half of the signers, including the drafter, 3 of the 4 editors, and all 5 of those who were consulted on the draft, were Unitarians, most of them ministers. While humanism is not quite as prominent today in Unitarian Universalist societies, along with Unitarian Universalism welcoming more religious pluralism in our circles, for much of the 20th century, Unitarianism and humanism were nearly synonymous. The story of the making of the Humanist Manifesto, to me, is a story of sharing, both sharing in the making of the document and sharing as people, Unitarian people especially, reflected on the manifesto and found a grounding for their beliefs that don't follow the standard path of so many religions. The making of the manifesto was a sharing in forming a what we believe statement to give a solid foundation to unbelief and to religious humanism. In the early 20th century, religious humanism took form largely through the work of Unitarians, and in mid-century it was commonly perceived as the dominant movement within Unitarian Universalism. But the searching did not stop, and our doors remained open for other religious liberals. In the past few years, there has been a rise in reverent language. People in our congregations embrace concepts of the supernatural previously dismissed in Unitarian Universalist circles. And for some, humanism doesn't really figure into their Unitarian Universalism. Yet, humanism remains part of the pluralistic mix, and humanists use reason, science, and a focus on this world and one another to explain what we know and to seek answers to great mysteries and what is yet undiscovered. In the 1990s, as I explored my new faith of Unitarian Universalism, I came to realize that I am a humanist, and that being a free thinker who doubts what many confess through dogma and doctrine is accepted, even encouraged, in this church. My theology is strongly grounded in the principles affirmed by Unitarian Universalist congregations, and my humanism is supported by the Unitarian Universalist principle of the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. My ethics and my religious life have a this-world orientation rather than speculating on what might happen after I die and focusing on attaining good standing in an afterlife. As a Unitarian Universalist humanist, I can have honor and integrity and responsibility while dealing with issues and situations and times of life and death, crisis and serenity, action and rest, special conditions and the routine. I live this life, the only one I know, as authentically as I can. And I do this in a world and in a church where everyone is not like me, and that's a good thing. Humanists aren't all the same either. Religious humanists and secular humanists have different philosophies, some having to do with the place of religious institutions in society. There are humanist atheists, agnostics, and theists. The variety of approaches to humanism goes well with the many theologies that guide Unitarian Universalists. What we have a chance to do as Unitarian Universalists and as humanists is to share our stories. We get to search for what it is in Unitarian Universalism that can keep us together while we honor other theologies. We find our own religious stories and share the stories of fellow congregants. We get to do this in many ways, from coming on a Sunday to hear stories from the pulpit, to small group ministry where we share in close quarters, to reading stories in publications of the Unitarian Universalist Association, to visiting with one another and having a conversation in the coffee hour after the service. We Unitarian Universalists are examiners. We expect each congregant to have her or his own theology, differing in at least subtle ways from our own beliefs. We study. What we shouldn't forget to do is to listen as well and to reclaim the joy of hearing and telling stories. The stories we share for religious inquiry are related to the questions raised by Paul Gauguin in a series of paintings, where he asked, where do we come from? What are we? And where are we going? So much of what people do to make sense of life, death, and our place in the universe is centered in stories. Since I've studied myths and world religions, when I hear a story of God coming down from heaven to dwell in this world, I wonder what makes this true and others not. Whether any or all could be true or false. And I wonder about the changing of stories. Do they move closer to truth? Or maybe they move to comfort listeners. In our Unitarian Universalist narrative, do the stories become central to us, or do we find comfort on the fringe? For all of this, we turn to story again and again. Sometimes the stories we share are religion as entertainment. Other times it's explanation. We 21st century humans have not discovered all there is to be discovered in the natural realm. And we haven't explained everything that happens or could happen in the world. Some people use religious stories to try to comprehend the unknown. I am content that some things cannot be explained yet. And I resist attributing something unexplained to the supernatural as a form of justification when there's still so much human discovery going on. Still, even in our Unitarian Universalist narrative, we turn to stories to make sense of things. Sharing stories is essential to being religious. Now let's sing together, and it's a hymn that's not in the order of service. Today is United Nations Day, and number 195, This Is My Song, tells a hopeful story of things in common. Number 195.